Do you want to see? Who's that? Do you see yourself? Do you see yourself? You are such a treat. Did I say the word? Did I say the word treat? Yeah, I did. You want me to finish up so we can go for a walk? Oh, you're a good girl. You're a good girl. Hey makeup friends, today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 eyeshadow palettes that I am decluttering from my collection. Let's get into this. As always, I want to start off by welcoming you back to my channel, or if you are new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and on my channel, we like to mix beauty, brains, and the occasional F-bomb. On my eyes today, I have the new palette from MAC. This is the Feast Your Eyes palette. And on my lips, also part of the new MAC collection, I have the shade Tarnished Reputation on. Okay. So that's the makeup that I have going on, but today we're going to be focusing on makeup I am saying goodbye to. I have 10 palettes sitting in front of me. We're just going to whip through them. I'll give you my reasons as to why I'm letting them go, and that's the video. So in absolutely no particular order, up first is this one here from Too Faced. This is the Natural Eyes palette, a very neutral palette. And the reason why I'm getting rid of it is because I just have so many neutral palettes and I reach for them more often than I reach for this one. There's nothing particularly bad about this palette, but the shimmers that are in here are kind of an odd choice, to be honest. Like this deep brown over here has a lot of sparkle in it, but this one is a matte. This one is more like a satin finish. This is a matte, whereas this is the shimmer. Like I would have preferred the larger palette, like the larger pans to all be shimmers and then these to all be mattes. I think that just would have made them easier to work with, to be honest, just in terms of the shades. So while it's not a bad palette and while the shades do apply really nicely, I just don't reach for it, so it's just tying up space. I have another Too Faced palette that I'm going to be saying goodbye to, and that is Pumpkin Spice. This one hit the market, I believe, fall of 2020, and I really did like the color story that was in there, but these shades are just really disappointing. I found this palette really frustrating to work with, especially the shimmers. They were just very lackluster. They were difficult to pick up out of the pan and apply. The mattes are fine, but they're nothing to write home about. And I do have these shades contained in other palettes. I'm just going to have to go on a little bit more of a hunt to gather more than one palette to find them all. So while I do like the convenience of having this color story all in one palette, the performance makes it such that I just never reach for this, regardless of how pretty it is. So for that reason, I'm going to say goodbye to it. I also have two palettes from Dominique Cosmetics that I'm going to be getting rid of. So on this hand, we have the Rustic Glam, and then there's also Berries and Cream over here. Now, I really don't have any complaints about the performance of these shades, although this one, frankly, I have not used very much at all, like maybe once since I got it. And that in and of itself kind of speaks to me. This one's just a strange mixture of shades, to be honest. I'm not entirely sure why I picked it up, except that it was on sale, and that was enough for me at the time. Not a very good reason to buy something, truly, but here we are, learn from my mistakes. It's just not a palette that I ever think to reach for, and then when I do reach for it, I'm like, well, how do I pair these together? I'm sure some people would have no problem doing it, but for me, for whatever reason, I just have a mental block when it comes to this palette. So I never use it. It's been sitting on my shelf for the better part of a year, gathering dust. It's time to let it go. Now, with respect to Berries and Cream, I do find this color story a lot easier to work with, and I do think that it's beautiful. And again, I do like the quality of these shadows, but I have these shades so many times over, and in other palettes that I reach for more often. So again, this one just comes down to basically being a casualty of me having too large of a collection. I prefer other palettes over this, so those are the ones that I reach for, and this one just is left neglected. So it's time to find homes for these palettes where somebody else is going to get use out of them because they're not being used here. A palette that is like squarely under the heading of makeup regrets is this one here from Jouer. This is the Tan Lines palette. And I wanted this for so long. It's been out for, I want to say about 3 years. I held off, and then I finally picked it up just a few months ago. only to realize that it is possibly the most frustrating palette in my collection at this point. It's just so difficult to work with. The mattes are fine. There's really not an issue there. They're not fantastic, but they're not bad. It's the shimmers in here. As beautiful as they are so finicky and so difficult to work with that I just never use this palette. But it was so much effort that it's just not worth keeping. Frankly, I probably should have returned it and at least got my money back, but I was dedicated to the cause. I'd wanted it for so long that I just really wanted it to work, and it just doesn't. So it's time to let it go. I have two palettes from Ace Beauty as well that I'm going to be getting rid of. So first up, we have the Classical Paradise palette. Again, it's a very pretty color story. It's very fall-esque in my opinion, but it's just a palette that I don't reach for. Again, I have a ton of palettes, and so some of them just tend to float to the surface, and those are the ones that I think about more. Those are the ones that I gravitate towards for whatever reason. And this is just one that keeps getting pushed further and further and further back in the shelf to the point where I can't remember the last time I used it. And because it's so beautiful and because it does perform well, I would like to give it to one of my friends who will use it, because otherwise it's just sitting here being ignored, and that's not good for anybody. So it's time to find it a new home. The other one from Ace Beauty that I'm going to be getting rid of is the Flare palette. This one is, again, a beautiful palette, but now that I've picked up the Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay, and I love that palette, a lot of the same shades that are in here are in that one, and I like that one better because it has a better ratio of mattes and shimmers, a few more options in there, and this one I just keep ignoring. So there's no point keeping it. I'm going to offer it to my friend Erin because I think she would do incredible things with this. She is so creative, and it is a good palette. It's just, it has run its course in my collection. I'm also going to be getting rid of the Secret palette from Nabla. While I don't mind the performance of this one, it's just a palette that I constantly forget about. I never remember that I even own this one. When I do see it, I never remember the name of it. Like, I just don't reach for it. It's an altogether forgettable palette to me. There's just nothing super unique about the color story. There's nothing amazing about the quality of the shadows that brings me back to it over and over again. It's not a bad palette by any stretch, but it just doesn't really fill any gap in my collection, and removing it from my palette collection is not going to create a hole. I'm probably not going to remember that I even owned this palette, if I'm being perfectly honest. No disrespect to Nabla, I do have their side-by-side palette, which I really like. It's just that this one gets lost in the mix. Next up is the Amrezy palette from ABH, and there are some shades in here that I absolutely adore. I think some of them are just so beautiful and unique, but it's not worth keeping the entire palette because I never reach for it. So even though there are some beautiful shades in here, I never reach for this palette regardless. So I could try and depot some of these shades out of here, but I'm not going to, because anytime I depot palettes, I always do it with the intention of, I'm going to get more use out of it by doing this. I don't. I never do. They then just sit in makeup purgatory, and then eventually I just throw out all of the depotted shadows. So I'm just going to spare myself that angst and just pass this on to a friend who will get use out of it. I'm going to be a little sad saying goodbye to some of these shadows. But I mean, we're talking like 3 shades out of 16. It's not enough to make me keep the palette. So that brings us to the 10th palette that I'm going to be decluttering, and that is the Tiffany's palette from Peachy Queen. I'll quickly show you the inside, and then I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant, just so you're aware. F-bombs, if they're going to drop, it's going to be in this next section. So, Peachy Queen. I have not enjoyed my experience with their customer service team, shall we say. So, if you recall, I have talked about this in a previous video. It was either the end of like July or end of June. I'm not entirely sure. But at any rate, I ordered this May 14th. So I got my confirmation on May 14th. I ordered this palette as well as a lipstick. And I obviously received this. I didn't receive the lipstick. So I emailed them and just said, hey, I didn't receive part of my order. Can you just issue me a refund? That'd be swell. Thanks so much. Now they did respond fairly quickly, but they did not say that they would give me a refund. They just said that they would ship the lipstick and then they would send me the shipping information. Never arrived, the shipping information or the lipstick. So I then followed up with them again and was like, hey, still don't have it. Can I get a refund, please? And they said, we're going to follow up and get you the shipping information. So just thanks for your patience, blah, 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 blah. Keeping in mind, I ordered this the middle of May. By August 27th, I still hadn't received anything. Yeah, August 27th, still hadn't received shipping notification, the lipstick, or a refund. So I reached out to them again and said, I still haven't received the lipstick I ordered, nor have I received a refund. I'm extremely disappointed in your customer service and will be sharing my experience with your brand with my YouTube audience. Don't necessarily like to pull the YouTuber card because it's not like I have a ton of clout, I really don't. But lickety split, I got the response that I wanted. Hi, we do apologize for this. We can issue a refund and $5 towards your next purchase. We are so sorry for the inconvenience. This is the first time they've actually acknowledged my request for a refund. So then I wrote back and said, please send the refund. I don't need a future credit. So that was August 27th I wrote to them. The 28th they responded. The 28th I said to them, just send the refund. I don't care about a credit. On August 29th, I got a response saying I put in your refund request and it'll be issued shortly. And then it was on September 1st that the refund was processed. Now, granted, it was like $10 US. Not a big deal. It was the principle of the matter. Drove me crazy. The customer service, it should not take, so say it even took 2 weeks for this to get to me. That's a fairly generous time to get a palette in the mail. That's 2 weeks. That takes us to the beginning of June. 3 months it took. 3 months for them to actually address the issue and resolve it in the way that I had requested 3 months prior. I will never order from Peachy Queen again. I don't want to keep the palette. I'm not impressed by the palette, and I'm sure as hell not impressed by the brand. So there we have it. If you've had a positive experience with them, that is fantastic. I have not, and so I am sharing my experience with Peachy Queen with you, as I told them I would do. So there we are. At any rate, that is it for today. Those are the 10 palettes that I am going to be decluttering and hopefully finding some good homes for. I have reached out to my friend Erin and showed her all of them, so she gets first dibs. And then there's an entire established pecking order. So at any rate, that is it for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in my next one. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.